Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. And today we're going to talk about math and SoulCalibur II, an awesome game that holds up nearly 20 years after its release. That's impressive. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the gameplay of SoulCalibur II, its different modes, and how things work as a whole. We'll be talking about the math in SoulCalibur as we do that, because it's everywhere, and that's not a bad thing. And I think that'll be really fun for me, because these videos tend to be, and I hope it's fun for you. And I hope it makes you think about fighting games in general different and or differently. And I hope you also think about gaming as a whole differently after this. That being said, let's get started. So, SoulCalibur II is an interesting game. Well, the SoulCalibur franchise is an interesting series because it is a unique series in its own right, and yet pretty traditional at the same time. And I say that because it is a weapons-based fighter if you're unfamiliar with the franchise. And at the same time, it does adhere to a lot of traditional fighting game mechanics and features. And I think that's cool because talking about this game will give you a window to like fighting games in general, I feel. And that's cool. So, SoulCalibur 2. Why SoulCalibur 2? Well, there are a lot of games in the SoulCalibur series. There's 7 main games and there's spin-offs as well. But SoulCalibur to me was the most interesting one. Like, it was incredibly polished, incredibly refined. It was very accessible to people, and I think that's brilliant. And I feel like the success of later games do build on like what was there, but it doesn't feel the same, if that makes sense. I do like the custom character creation systems that are in some of the later games. But that being said, yeah, so SoulCalibur 2 is probably to this day still my favorite. And by probably I mean, yeah, it's definitely my favorite. So, the gameplay. Let's talk about the fighting and how that all works. So, you have 25 characters throughout the game that you can eventually play as. And from them, they each have their own weapon. And here's the thing. With those weapons, they affect how you move on the screen, right? They affect what you can do with your character. Like, you have the same controls for each character, but what they can do varies, and I think that's cool. It manages to be very intricate and very natural at the same time. Like, when you play it, I feel like you'll get that. If you have played it, I think you already do get that. And I think that's really cool. So the idea is, with fighting games, the goal is typically to deplete the other's health while maintaining your health, right? And that health is a bar. And the idea, though, is that there's math behind it, right? Like, you have a good indication of where you're at. If a character is like hammering you, right? Like, you get to the point where you know you're at like about 50%, so you know you have to like kick something up a notch, right, in order to win. But my whole point is like that bar is a visual representation of data. It lets you know what's going on your side of the screen, and the same goes for your opponent. And I think that's really cool. And so you have math being involved in that health from the start, and then there's math in the amount of rounds that you're playing. There's math in how long a match takes. It's a 3D fighter, which I do feel like it can be easy to forget if you're not careful, because we're used to the whole 2D part. But the idea is you can move around. But 2D, 3D, no matter how you cut it, there's math in that. And in this case, though, it gets interesting because you can use the fact that you're in 3D to move around opponents, throw them off, right? You can also, in addition to depleting opponent's health in order to defeat them, you can do a ring out. So you can use some strategy there and get into the right position so you can ring someone out. And there's math in that too. And there's math in the amount of combos that you're doing. There's math in that timing that's involved with that. And that's not all. There's a lot going on with SoulCalibur. There are like soul charge moves, and I never really got into that too much. But there's math in doing that, and it's dangerous because you have to like build things up, and it leaves you vulnerable. And some moves in general can leave you vulnerable. So you're using math and strategy with that. And the whole thing that I like to say with these sort of videos and in general is that you might not be doing the math on paper, but you're definitely doing it in your head, right? So you're not writing it down necessarily, but you're definitely doing the math. And so with ring outs, there's math in positioning yourself in order to get that advantage, or you could just be paying really close attention. But your opponent can also ring out you, so you have to be careful with that. And it's a pretty fast-paced match. When you're fighting a match in Soul Calibur. There's a better way to say that. So the matches go by pretty quickly. The health is reasonable, I feel. And you have some moves that are really quick, some moves that could do some more damage but might take more timing, so you gotta kind of weigh things. You might be like, okay, so I can do this move, but it might take a little longer to execute it. It might be slow, but it's going to deal more damage. What do I do, right? So you gotta use math real quick to figure out how you want to do things, and there's some strategy in that. And another big part of the games is it has a guard impact system. So blocking is cool, and you can, even if you hit your weapons at the same time, cancel each other out. And the timing for that, I mean, it has to be really good. But here's what's interesting with the guard impact system. So it is a system where you can not only block your opponent, but you can issue in a counter, because when you do a guard impact, a flashlight happens when you hit the blade if you time it, or sorry, when my opponent hits your weapon if you time it right, and it kind of pushes them back, and you're able to start a combo, do some cool stuff with that. And here's the thing though, if your opponent does that and you do guard impact, right, then they can do guard impact with your counter move after your guard impact. So it's like, hey, opponent comes to you, you have real good timing, and bam, you knock them back, and they're knocked back, but you hit them up with a counter, and they know it's coming, and bam, they can hit that, and then they can get the advantage. But you can also do that. So it's like, hey, someone hits you, you do your guard impact, you repel them, they go back, you do your counter, they do their guard impact, you get knocked back, they come at you, you do your guard impact again, and it can go on and on until someone messes it up. Or someone can catch you off guard with that, and you think you're going to get into a guard impact battle, but then they do a different move, and you have to be paying real close attention to what they're doing, no matter how you cut it, because there's high attacks, low attacks, medium attacks, and things can switch up on you, and everything runs pretty fluidly, pretty smoothly. So you have to be doing a lot of quick math in your head as you go on while you're trying to take out your opponent. And I think that's really, really cool. And then there are different game modes, right? Because there's arcade, which is classic. There's team battle. There's versus mode and versus team battle. They have what is effectively their story mode, with weapons master mode, and I think all of that is cool because they all function differently. There's math in all those. With team battle, right, you get multiple teammates, and so you have to coordinate a strategy with the characters that you're using. It's like, oh, well, this person might cover something that you're looking for, and this other character might cover something else. And the whole point is, all right, is you're balancing your team. There's a lot of math in that. And with versus, it's pretty standard. But the idea is, you're using strategy, you're adjusting. You could be fighting AI, you could be fighting an opponent. And with arcade, you have 8 levels to get through. And again, it's classic how it works. You can set the amount of rounds. You can set the time. You can set the difficulty. So you can have some fun with it. And sometimes I like to go in extra difficult. There's a better way to say that. Sometimes I go in the most extreme difficulty because I know that the opponents will use guard impact more, and so I can get into really cool guard impact battles, and that's really fun. It can go on and on and on and on and on until someone breaks, and it's usually the AI. But yeah, so there's math and all that. For the arcade, one of the cool things is, in addition to being able to play real quick, if you can't commit to like a long game, in addition to being able to do that, you do get money from winning. So there's a greater incentive to uh, you know play arcade mode. So it's like, hey, you get these 8 matches, and for the record, if you want to, and you're just like, hey, I need to do a quick burst, you can set 1 round. So you can go do that and go on, go forward, get the money, and it's cool. The other thing with arcade is, like, if you lose, you have the continue screen, and you have 10 seconds to press start, or else you'll lose that particular run through of your arcade. And one of the other big things I want to talk about that I mentioned was like Weapon Master mode. So throughout all the different modes, you're collecting characters and all that stuff, and I think like Weapon Masters mode, you have the most opportunity to collect characters and items and all that good stuff. Like, you're playing through the modes, and you actually can go to a store in Weapon Master modes, and so you can get different weapons, you can get different characters, different costumes, and all that good stuff. And it's pretty cool. So it's like there's like 10 chapters that you have to go through, where you have to beat things on a regular level, and then like on a harder difficulty. There are sub chapters within those chapters, and there's also extra chapters. And throughout all of that, you're unlocking a bunch of money, and you can buy a bunch of items, and that's really cool. And the thing about the weapons in weapon mode that you can actually use outside of weapon mode is this. So they affect your stats, and they also give you different effects. Like, there might be a weapon that a character has that boosts their stats, like gives them higher like attack or defense, or like more health, but they might also have a special effect that's like draining. So which is pretty cool, because like, hey, you can also damage your opponent while getting more HP. And so throughout that, right, there's a lot of math in that. There's a lot of math into all of this, and that's really cool. And so you get to strategize, you get to collect money, you get to do a lot of different things as you progress in weapon mode, and also you get more bang for your buck, right? Because you have arcade, and that's fine, and that's good, and you have your verses, and again, that's fine, that's good, and those are like the real big sellers, right? But in this fighting game, it's nice to have a story mode that you could play through, and I think that's really cool. So while it has a story, it's not like the best in the world, but it's there. But you play Weapon Masters mode more for the unlockables. And here's the thing: once you collect weapons, there are extra modes for all of the modes that I mentioned earlier, so that you can play with different weapon effects, and that adds an element of strategy. Because if you're playing on neutral, there's already enough strategy in that to, I think, make most people happy. But here, it kicks it up another notch, right? And there's a lot of math in that too, right? Because you got to decide which item you want, and how you want to balance things. Because you could have a weapon that gives you way more damage, but also drains your health, or you could have something that works, like a weapon that works really fast, but is weak. And so you got to think about what you want to do, and there's math in that. And whether we realize it or not, that's what we're doing, right? We're doing math when we're playing these fighting games. We're doing math when we're gaming in general. Math and gaming go really well together, and I think that's a beautiful thing. That being said, SoulCalibur II is an amazing game. It has so much math in it, and that to me is really cool. But in addition to having all of the math in it, it's a very refined fighter that somehow managed to be ahead of his time. Like, because it took everything that worked about the previous entries, and it kind of turned everything up to 11. It had way more characters. It had way more polish. And while other games added to it, I don't feel like they had that same fluidity. I don't feel like that had that same accessibility, because they kept on adding on features, and that was fine, and that was good, and some of them are really fun. Like the character creation system is a blast. But I feel like it lost some accessibility as it moved forward. And I mean, that's unfortunate, because I feel like over time, SoulCalibur doesn't get talked about with the respect that it deserves, and that's a shame. Because I remember when SoulCalibur II came out. It was enjoyed by many. It sold a lot of copies. It got a lot of good reviews, and like a lot of people I know and played against were big fans of it. And for me, I played it on like every system, right? I played it on PS2 because I own a PS2, but I've also played it on GameCube. I've also played it on Xbox, and I've also played it in an arcade. And here's the thing: I played it in an arcade before I played it at home, and that's wild. Arcades are awesome, and I haven't been to one in a while, but they are crazy awesome, and I think it's worth it to go to an arcade if you haven't, if you can find one these days. But yeah, I had a lot of fond memories of like going to arcades when I was younger. But yeah, so Soul Calibur 2 is an incredible game. It holds up nearly 20 years after it came out. Oh, and one small thing that I did want to brag about. Like I went to like Otakon like oh god, a long time ago. Like mid 2000s or sort of early-ish 2000s. I want to say maybe 2007, maybe 2008. I Either way, one of those years, there was a Soul Calibur 2 competition in the game room, and I did really well in that. I got to the semifinals, uh, and I did not win past that, unfortunately, but I had a really good run, got pretty far, and I was glad that I got as far as I did because I was pretty rusty with Soul Calibur at that point. And yeah, so it is really fun series, or it's a really fun series. And if you haven't played this whole Caliber game, I hope you do. And if you have, I hope you do again. And if you do have to pick any, I would suggest Soul Calibur 2. It's just like it is the best experience for me, Soul Calibur wise. Oh, and I guess one of the other big things that I wanted to mention was Soul Calibur 2 was the first time that they had featured characters from other media. Like, so PlayStation 2 had Hayachi from Tekken, and the GameCube version had Link from Legend of Zelda, and Xbox had Spawn from the comics. And it was cool because licensing deals had to be worked out, and that there's money in that, and there's math in that, and just the logistics of how this all goes. I heard that instead of Hayachi, they wanted to put Cloud from Final Fantasy VII in there, but they couldn't get the licensing to work. I think that would have been crazy. It would have been bonkers. He would have been OP, stupidly broken, but I would have welcomed it. Hey, Cloud has been in other fighting games though since then, and he's definitely a big part of Smash, and I think he's pretty broken there. But you can make that argument about a lot of characters in Smash. It's interesting how that game works and functions, but like I like it. But this is about Soul Calibur 2, right? So yeah, I have had a lot of fond memories, or I have a lot of fond memories of Soul Calibur 2. I had a lot of great experiences with that game growing up. Like I got to play, family members. I got to play friends. Got to play in tournaments here and there. Just like if I happened to be at it, like Otakon. So yeah, Soul Calibur is amazing. It still holds up, and I'm glad that I'm replaying it now. I could not recommend that game enough. And for the record, there's a lot of math that goes into designing a game and making it function like that and making things balance. And I think that's impressive. I think that's really cool. And if you have anything to add to the conversation, please do. I welcome it. Have a great day. Professor Prime out.